we're on to the Raiders now, right?
We are on to the Raiders. Antonio Pearce taking over Tom Telesco's first year as general manager with the Raiders. Gardner Minshew going to be the starter. Minshew mania with the Raiders right now. It's a it's an interesting team in transition. They were one of the teams who theoretically needed a quarterback this offseason. Would have been in the mix for one of those 6 first round quarterbacks, but they were left with nothing as musical chairs ended. They're going with Gardner Minshew ahead of Aiden O'Connell. They still have Davante Adams there, still have Jacoby Myers. They did go with Brock Bowers in the first round to complement last year's second round tight end Michael Mayer. So you've got, on paper, a nice group of pass catchers there, assuming Davante Adams is happy. When he's happy and playing well, when he's happy, he's still a top 3 receiver. Like, that's not crazy to say, right? That Davante Adams is in that top 3 to 5 mix at receiver. And then defensively, they surprised me last year. They played way better than I expected on the defensive side of the ball last year. What are you looking for the Raiders heading into 24?
Yeah, I think Davante Adams is definitely not happy. The question is more, is it a problem or does he want out of there? If you watch any of that receiver documentary, the Netflix thing, like poor Davante Adams, the guy goes to the Raiders, thinks he's reuniting with his old college teammate, his quarterback, Derek Carr. They ship off Derek Carr, and now it's like, oh, unlucky Davante, you've got this group to work with instead. And this is like year 2 of that, right? Sorry, Davante, we tried to get a quarterback, but we ended up with Gardner Minshew versus Aiden O'Connell as your quarterback battle, and one of those guys is going to be throwing you the ball this season. In fact, let's be real, both of those guys at some point are going to be throwing you the ball because neither one of them is going to nail this job down long term. So, yeah, there have been talk, right, that at some point Davante Adams is going to try and get himself traded to the Jets. I don't know if that happens or if he's just stuck with the last few years of his career dealing with the Raiders quarterback situation when they've been unable to find one. But yeah, Adams is an incredibly good receiver. Jacoby Myers is a good number 2. Now they've got those 2 tight ends, Michael Mayer, the more traditional inline guy, Brock Bowers, the movement option, the slot weapon, the kind of weapon that they can move around. They've got some other guys that could be factors as well. It's a good group of pass catchers. It's just that it's being targeted by Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah, it is one of those seasons where if you're a Raiders fan, are you just rooting for a better draft pick to have the long-term answer at quarterback? That's Minshew's probably not the long-term answer. It sounds like O'Connell's not going to be, and as a 4th round pick, O'Connell shouldn't be. It's just, hey, give him a shot. He showed some stuff last year, but he's been very inconsistent. I think Minshew can do some damage in this offense, though. There was times last year where he was pretty careless with the ball early on, but at the end of the day, we mentioned on the AFC South show, the Colts were on the doorstep of the playoffs with Minshew as starter last year. I think he's one of the best backups in the NFL because when he does have to start, and he's a starter right now, he can win some games. Offensive line should be decent. They did a nice job. Colton Miller's there, and they're trying a reclamation project, either Cody Whitehair or just hoping Jackson Powers Johnson, their 2nd round pick, can step in and play. Andre James has developed at center, and they're in creep back toward average area from an offensive line. So I think the offense can be solid this year with Minshew at the helm.
Yeah, there was a 2-week stretch last year where Minshew had 12 turnover-worthy plays, according to PFF. That is unbelievably terrible. Like, I can't ever think of it. That might be a 2-game record. Like, I can't believe there's been anybody with more than 12 turnover-worthy plays across a 2-game stretch.
Didn't we look that up last year? Didn't we look into that? It was the great John Skelton was in that.
Well, no, I think we checked that 7 was a record, like at the 1-game thing. I don't know if we checked if the 2-game stretch, but anyway, 2 games before that, he'd had 3 against the Baltimore Ravens. So he had like a season's worth of turnover-worthy plays in basically a month-long stretch that encompassed 3 games. Outside of that, he was generally back to being like reasonably careful with the football and not a problem. So yeah, look, Minshew can definitely make some things happen within this offense. It's just that we know he's probably not a long-term answer. And unfortunately, he's probably too good to like do that target the draft pick thing, right? Oh, it's okay if he's a complete disaster. We'll end up with a high draft pick. We'll be able to finally get our quarterback. Like Minshew might actually be this like nightmare purgatory quarterback where he might get you on the doorstep of the postseason. He's probably not going to get you to the postseason, but he's too good to get you, a number one overall draft spot.
Didn't I call him tank proof a couple of years ago? If you're
Yeah, I
looking to
think so.
tank, that could be a t-shirt, tank proof. If you're looking to tank and get a good draft pick, Gardner Minshew's not your guy. He's too good. He's too good to tank. One other element here too, when Antonio Pearce took over last year, look, the Raiders, they played hard and they were competitive. They're moving on from the Josh McDaniels era, which was, now in hindsight, it was a disaster for the Raiders, and McDaniels' 2 stints as head coach were among the worst in NFL history. But they loved running the ball last year once Pearce took over. Josh Jacobs is out. You now have a backfield of Zamir White, Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah, Dylan Laube, I think is going to be a third down type of option. I don't know if that's the backfield where you really want to have a run first attack with Jacobs out. And I think you want to actually lean into some of the playmakers that they have through the pass game.
Yeah, I think part of that is going to depend. It's the kind of backfield where you definitely ask, well, okay, how good is my offensive line? If I have a great offensive line, I'm okay with that backfield and we can definitely still have some production. You look at the group that the Raiders have, and you're like, all right, that's fine. It's okay, but it's probably not a difference-making offensive line where you can say, yeah, my backfield is definitely a decent group and we're going to have real production. It's that the run game, I think overall is definitely an area that could be a weakness.
Going into last season, I did not have a ton of faith in the Raiders defense. It looked like Max Crosby had a whole bunch of question marks. Crosby is an absolute superstar. If every time we mention Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Crosby's in that discussion. He is at that level of edge rusher. They didn't have any established rusher opposite him last year. They drafted Tyree Wilson at number 7 overall. He was battling injuries, didn't really produce, but Malcolm Kuntz stepped up, did a nice job opposite Crosby. And then before you know it, they're picking up Jack Jones, from New England, and he's playing pretty well at corner as a reclamation project. And so they played hard. And now you add Christian Wilkins to the mix. He's making $27.5 million per year to play defensive tackle. I think the defense can do some damage this year for the Raiders.
Yeah, that group at one point looked like a group with like Max Crosby and basically no other talent on it. Now you can identify quite a lot of other sort of key components that say, all right, this could be a good defense. Now it's maybe more fragile than some other defenses because Jack Jones has been, he's on his next team already. He's sort of been run out of one place. Maybe the wheels could fall off that quickly. Nate Hobbs, we've already seen what happens if you sort of move him out of position or ask him to do things that he's not necessarily accustomed to. But you look at it and you say, look, Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby, Malcolm Kuntz, if Tyree Wilson develops going forward, given his incredible sort of size and explosiveness, the cornerback group of Jack Jones, Nate Hobbs, Jacorian Bennett, I think has some talent. There's some ability in the secondary with the safeties and the linebackers. Like, this is definitely a unit that could be very good, even if the talent level is a little bit more vulnerable, maybe to kind of a bad end of what they can do.
Did you mention the heart and soul of the defense, Robert Spillane?
No, not yet.
89 PFF run defense grade last year. The heart and soul of this defense, Antonio Pearce, he's the guy that Pearce identified as the man that they're building the defense around. So look, we joke about Spillane a little bit, but hey, the Raiders, they played well down the stretch. They had that Christmas Day win against the Chiefs. Now they may be chirping about that a little bit too much. I'm a little concerned about how many comments with the Raiders. Oh, we figured out the Chiefs, and they did the Kermit the Frog thing and everything. I'm a little worried about what the Chiefs are going to try to do to retaliate to this Raiders defense. But look, I was impressed with how hard they played last year. I still think they need, I know they want more from Tyree Wilson, the number 7 overall pick, who's a length, athletic project type, who's just got to play football better, a lot like Trayvon Walker. They're trying to move him around inside and outside to create mismatches. They might have that ability this year with Kuntz becoming that edge rusher opposite Crosby. Maybe Tyree Wilson rushes over guards. but I think they and then with Christian Wilkins in there as well, they have a chance to have a decent 4-man rush if you get some more development from Tyree Wilson. So yeah, I like what the Raiders look like defensively. So what does the best case scenario look like for the Raiders this year?
It's tough because even if even if Gardner Minshew plays well, you get the sort of best version of him, and maybe that's good enough to actually squeak you into the playoffs. You're still sort of stuck with. I mean, is that an answer at quarterback? Like, is there any scenario where they run into next year with Gardner Minshew as QB1 and they're comfortable with that being the case? Probably not. So I guess best case scenario is that's the reality. Like Minshew plays well enough, they sneak into the postseason and they can just feel good about last year, even if it's not necessarily a long term option.
Let me paint a picture for you. I've cited this a few times this offseason. A lot of times we always think about the long-term prospects of the team, and if you don't have an answer at quarterback, theoretically you want to draft higher so you get a QB. What if this year Minshew has a similar year to last year, right? You're on the cusp of the playoffs. The team looks good with him, and you put yourself in position to maybe bring in a Dak Prescott during the offseason as a free agent. So I'm almost saying best case scenario is you look good, you look competitive, you show that you have this strong foundation to bring in, you know, a free agent quarterback. And it looks like only Dak Prescott is the only, or a trade for a viable quarterback. But there's I don't know who's available besides Dak potentially. So I think that's one of the best case scenarios here for the Raiders is you lay this foundation to bring in your quarterback of the future.
Yeah, you become a destination for Dak Prescott in the offseason.
A destination. Yeah, it's a destination building season for Antonio Pearce and the Raiders. No offense to Minshew. I love Minshew. I don't think he's going to beat the Chiefs and take it to the Super Bowl, right? I just don't think that's going to happen. Worst case for the Raiders, they don't win a whole lot of games.
Yeah, the total lack of any quarterback consistency torpedoes the season.
Well, I want to talk about the Pierce thing for a second here too, because you and I talked about this a lot last year, and I'm usually anti interim head coach gets the head coaching job, right? Because it's usually this it's a false positive. The interim coach comes in, it's a bad situation, he makes the bad situation a little bit better, and you're like, well, he turned it around, that's great. But it's a false positive. It's not the real job. The real job is not to come in and do half a season of work. It's to do all of the work in the offseason, to build the program, to motivate players all the way through the spring and the summer and into the fall. And it's just not the real job. It's not a proxy for the real job. But the Raiders said they thought just like me a couple of years ago, right? They didn't do the interim head coach thing. They went and got Josh McDaniels and it failed greatly. So they said, hey, we'll give you a shot here, Antonio Pearce. So I'm intrigued by what does he do with this full offseason? Because he did some good stuff last year for the Raiders, turning things around.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they hadn't given him the job, there would have been like a locker room riot. Everybody wanted him to get the job internally, and I agree with you. I think there's definitely a danger to that. You're maybe swayed by the sort of the buoying effect of simply getting rid of the problem mid-season, and the interim guy rides that wave to some maybe greater than deserved or greater than expected success. But everybody in that locker room wanted Antonio Pearce to get that gig. You didn't do it the last time that happened, with Rich Bisaccia, and that didn't work out. So I feel like you have to go this way and just see what he can do.
Key player position group. I'm always on Tyree Wilson watch just because 7th overall pick, and will he develop? Will he be what people expected, hoped that he would be with the traits that he showed coming out of Texas Tech? I'm also looking at Jack Jones, man. I mean, he went from showing signs of being a steal for New England, off-field issues, kind of he leaves New England and goes to the Raiders, and he's got the pick 6 in the Christmas game for the Raiders and looks great at corner. If he keeps his head on straight, he could be a very good player. Will he keep that up? But the cornerback position overall, I think for the Raiders is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Jack Jones is, but the cornerback overall, like Jones is maybe the obvious one to be like Jack Jones, given his history in Las Vegas, doesn't seem like a great pairing, but it's been working incredibly well so far. Jacorian Bennett on the other side, I think has a ton of talent, but is young and inconsistent. Nate Hobbs, I think, is good, but like those two outside corners, can they either stay or get to playing at a really high level?